Good morning, everybody. Before we continue with what we'd be learning yesterday about matzah, just want to say something again about the situation. And that is that this Shabbos, all the shuls will be closed. And not only will the shuls be closed here in Crown Heights, but in Brooklyn and all other Jewish communities. Hi to all the people that are saying hi. All the communities, and pretty much around the world. And it seems pretty shocking. Shabbos Mevarchim. We're supposed to be reading a special portion of the Torah. So one of the thoughts I'd like to share with you about this, in fact, there's some people that are arguing and saying, no, Jews always fought these kind of things, the shul has to be open. But the Rabbanim, the rabbis, ruled that the shuls have to be closed because this is putting people's lives in danger. Maybe not the people that are going to be attending the shul, but there's a ripple effect because people are close to each other. They pick up the virus, God forbid, one from the other. They become carriers. And at the end, it could lead to someone who's an older person or his health is compromised, God forbid, and he won't be able to handle the virus. So in order to prevent that from happening, they ruled that people shouldn't even go to the shuls and the shul should be closed down. 770 is closed down. So I just want to say that last week's parsha we learned about Moshe Rabbeinu breaking the luchos. And the last words in the Torah, which is the last book of Torah, which is the book of Devarim, and the last words in the book of Devarim is about the greatness of Moshe Rabbeinu and the things that he's accomplished. And then the last words are how he broke the luchos in front of the eyes of the Jewish people. The Rabbi once spoke about this. It was very emotionally charged sikha. Well, the Rabbi asked, that doesn't sound like a compliment to Moshe Rabbeinu that he broke the luchos. And why would the Torah choose to finish the entire Torah and talk about something negative that Moshe Rabbeinu did? True, Hashem agreed to him, but it's still breaking the luchos. And the answer is that the reason why Moshe Rabbeinu broke the luchos was to protect the Jewish people. Like Rashi explains it in different ways, how by breaking the luchos, the Jews were not bound to its rules, and therefore they were protected from any of the consequences. And Moshe Rabbeinu's love for the Yidden was so great and unconditional, and he also understood that this is Hashem's love for the Yidden is unconditional, and it even surpasses the love for Torah. And therefore he saw that it is okay to break the Torah to save the lives of the Yidden. Oh, you have to understand that this is really an amazing thing. There's a story that I once read about a rabbi. He wrote how he prevented an intermarriage. There was a young man that wanted to marry out, and everybody in the family tried to convince him to give up his plans. Nothing helped. The rabbi himself spoke to him. Nothing helped. And one time the rabbi said to him, come to the synagogue and listen this evening. So he came to the synagogue. He's respectful. And the rabbi said to him, come, let's go together to the sanctuary. They went to the sanctuary. It was dark. Nobody was there. It wasn't a time of davening, of services. There was one little light that was shining on top of the ark of the Aron Kodesh. And the rabbi says to him, take out one of the Torah scrolls. And he says, Rabbi, but there are no services now. He says, I know, but I'm the rabbi. and you can take out one of the Torah scrolls. Okay, so he took out a Torah scroll. Then the rabbi says to him, take the Torah scroll, throw it on the floor, and stamp on it with all your might. And he says, Rabbi, I can't do that. But I'm the rabbi, I'm telling you to do it. And as much as he begged him to do it, he refused. He just couldn't get himself to do that, to stamp on the Torah. And the rabbi said to him, I want you to know that by you marrying out of the faith, you're trampling on the Torah in a much, much worse way than trampling on it with your feet physically. And that got him, it finally registered him what he's doing, and as a result of that, he discontinued the relationship. Now that's a story in itself, but I just want to bring out, look, even someone who's ready to marry out of the faith, so obviously very, very far from Yiddishkeit, nevertheless, to trample on a Torah scroll? No way. And here, what did Moshe Rabbeinu do? He took the luchos, which is not a Torah scroll. The luchos were the stones that Hashem himself wrote the Aseret HaDibros, the Ten Commandments, in these luchos. Hashem's personal so-called handwriting. He wrote it, and he made it, and he handed it to Moshe. Imagine taking that and breaking it. Nevertheless, Moshe Rabbeinu did that in order to save the lives of the Yidden. So therefore, what going on this Shabbos, no doubt it'll lead to things that are going to be much greater, but to realize that everything that's being done, we should follow the rules of the Rabbanim. It's all about protecting the lives of Yidden. And even if it makes a difference in one life, it's like an entire world. And Hashem will help. Mit Hashem, this time will pass over very quickly. And we'll be able to go back to things the way they were, but that's not good enough. It has to be much, much greater than when they were, which is, of course, the Gula through Mashiach Tzidkenu. So let's go back to our discussion about matzah. We started talking about this yesterday, that matzah is called Michla de Mehenusa, bread of faith, which means matzah provides us with amunah, with faith in Hashem. And matzah has a certain spiritual power that when a person eats matzah, this helps them have amunah in Hashem. So, we explained yesterday, we left off with this thought that on the surface it seems to be strange. How could a matzah do that? I know we take certain pills, and we take pills and that helps us, that heals us. What could we imagine? A matzah is a big round pill that when you eat it and you digest it, you get amunah. But amunah is something spiritual, belief in Hashem. So we said yesterday, matzah and all mitzvahs are not just symbolic, but a mitzvah is a conduit, a channel through which Hashem transmits spiritual light and spiritual energy. And the spiritual light and energy that Hashem transmits through the matzah is to empower us to have amunah in Hashem. But let's explain this a little bit better. How do we get amunah through the matzah? And where does it come from? So there's a very famous quote in Gemara, Yisrael maminim b'nei maminim, which means the Jewish people are believers, children of believers, which means to us belief is inherent, it's part of our nature. And again, how could that be just a natural thing? Any person that's intelligent, thinks intellectually, questions things and researches and tries to get answers, how could he just naturally have faith? There are a lot of questions. But this saying in the Gemara implies that every Yid naturally believes in Hashem. Where does that come from? So this is the way Chassidus explains it. It's based on a quote that's found, quote from Pirkei Avos, where it says, every single day, there's a heavenly voice that comes out of Har Sinai, Har Chorev, and that heavenly voice says, Oilhem the Briyos Melbeinu Shel Torah. Woe to those people that they embarrass the Torah, which means woe to the people that do not study Torah, and by doing that, they're basically dismissing the Torah and showing that to them the Torah has no value, and that's a terrible thing. And the Baal Shem Tov asked, who is this voice meant for? If it's meant for tzaddikim, righteous people, they hear heavenly voices, but they don't need this voice because they are already studying Torah and they're righteous people, they're tzaddikim. So if this voice is meant for people that are not righteous people, people that violate the Torah, don't study Torah, these people don't hear heavenly voices, so they're not even aware of the voice, and it's not accomplishing anything for them. So what's the point? In fact, there are more such Gemaras about voices coming from heaven. One of them, that is a voice that comes out and says, Shuvu banim shevavim, my children, return to Hashem. Who is it for? The tzaddik doesn't need to return, and those that need to return don't hear heavenly voices. So the answer that's given is that it says in Gemara, is based on a story, it's found in Tanakh, that there were three people, Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah. They weren't ordinary people, they were great people. They were standing near Daniel, who was a prophet. And Daniel, who was a prophet, saw a prophecy. And when he saw this prophecy, he was overcome with such fear that his knees were knocking against each other from fear. And then it says that the other people that were standing next to him, the other three, they didn't see anything, but they were also overcome with fear. So the Gemara asks a question, the obvious question, being that they didn't see this vision, why were they overcome with fear? And the Gemara answers, Afal gav ihu lechazi mazlahu chazi. Even though they didn't see, but their mazel saw. And this has become a very famous quote in Chassidus, it's found in Tanya. Even though they didn't see, but their mazel saw. What does that mean? It means as follows, that there are two parts to the neshama, the soul. We know that the soul initially is in Shamayim. The difference between the soul and the body is something, when a baby is born, that's when the body is created. The body is created through the father and the mother. And of course, Hashem is the third partner. And the physical body is something which did not exist before. It only comes in existence after and through the parents bringing this child into the world. But the soul is different. The soul exists from the beginning of creation. And the soul is in heaven. And it waits for the time that God will tell that soul, now the time has come for you to go down to this world, enter this specific body, in this specific location, to these specific parents, under these specific circumstances, to fill out your specific spiritual divine mission. So the soul existed before, and the soul comes down into the body. Generally speaking, we cannot compare the life of the soul when it's in heaven to the life of the soul when it's invested in a body. When the soul is in heaven, it experiences godliness and spirituality firsthand. In other words, it's in a sense the opposite of our life down here. We see tables and chairs, we see people and animals, we see buildings, we see all the physical things. When we talk about spiritual things, we have to learn about it and try to understand it. It's not in the same way part of our reality like things that we see. The soul up there is just the opposite. Its reality is spirituality. It sees godliness, it hears godliness, it's surrounded by godliness, and it's constantly experiencing godly experiences. And that's what the soul is occupied with. So naturally, when the soul comes down, it's considered not just coming down. It's not coming down a geographic change, it's a spiritual change. Coming down means spiritually it's no longer where it was before. It changes, that everything godly becomes concealed and hidden, and all we see is the physical and the material. We have to struggle and work very hard to develop our sensitivity to something which is godly and spiritual. But Chassidus explains the following. When the neshama, when the soul comes down and gets invested in the body, it's not the entire soul that comes down. There's a part of the soul, in fact, the primary part of the soul remains in Shemayim. In other words, the deeper part of the soul never really changes. There's a part of the soul that continues to see godliness and hear godliness and experiencing everything godly that's going on in the spiritual realm. There's a small, external, superficial part of the neshama that comes down to this physical world, enters the body, and that's the part of the soul that we're conscious of, and that's the part of the soul that everything is concealed. So this is the meaning of the words, even though they didn't see, their mazel saw. The mazel means the part of the soul that's deeper, and it remains in tune with everything in the spiritual realm. The part of the soul that doesn't change. So therefore, Daniel saw a vision. There was something going on in heaven, something incredible. And this was so powerful that it caused him to be overcome with fear. The other people didn't see it, but their soul that's up there did see it. And as a result of that, the soul that was up there was overcome with tremendous fear. So even though the people down here and the conscious soul didn't see anything, but what they were feeling was the fear. In other words, the fear that the soul up there was experiencing was projected into the soul that's conscious in the body. So this is a general principle to understand our neshama that is much more to the soul than what meets the eye. We're conscious of our soul, but that's really a very small part of the soul. There's a much deeper part of the soul, and that part of the soul is in Shemayim, it's in heaven, and it is capable of seeing and hearing and experiencing all the things that are going on a godly realm in a way no different than it was before the neshama descended, because that's the part of the soul that doesn't descend. It remains intact spiritually just like before. So therefore, when a person, for example, does a mitzvah or observes someone else doing a mitzvah, sometimes we find people visit a religious family for Shabbos. They're sitting by the Shabbos table. They're part of the Shabbos experience, and they're so uplifted, they're so inspired. Very often they make a resolution that they want to do this for the rest of their life. It's a beautiful thing. On the surface, it's very difficult to see how a person could make this 180-degree turn just because they had this nice little experience. What is it that inspires the person? What makes him feel so uplifted is because down here he sees the technical things. We make kiddush, we eat challah, there's fish on the table, all sorts of delicacies. The rabbi and the rebbitzin are very nice and very warm and very pleasant. These are all nice things. But there's something deeper going on, and the soul of the person, the deeper part of the soul, sees the holiness of Shabbos and feels the holiness of Shabbos. And as a result of that, the deeper part of the soul is inspired and uplifted in a way that happens only on Shabbos. And that inspiration is projected into the conscious part of the soul. So the person is in a physical house, enjoying Shabbos in the physical way, but there's certain spiritual inspiration which is very powerful, but that comes as a result of what the soul is seeing up there. Hundreds of stories, if not thousands of stories of people that went to the Kotel. And when they went to the Kotel, they were so inspired, also made decisions about changing their lives. So many stories of people. And some of them didn't even know what the real meaning of the Kotel is, what it's all about. How did this happen? Because the Kotel is a place where the Shekhinah is present. Hashem's presence is there. And therefore, when a person is standing there, Physically, with the eye, we don't see anything except for a wall. Consciously, our soul doesn't experience anything spiritual because all you see is a wall. But there's a part of my neshama that sees the tremendous spiritual presence and what is going on spiritually in this very holy place. And that part of my neshama becomes inspired. And that inspiration is projected into the part of the neshama that's conscious. I remember once we had a student that, before she became religious, she was very much into women's lib and all sorts of things that made it hard for her to relate to religion. And she, in fact, wasn't really so interested in religion, but she ended up in a Chabad house because of a sort of side reason. She had a cousin who was part of the Chabad house, and the cousin was trying to convince the cousin to stop smoking. And the cousin said, let's make a deal. If you come to the Chabad house, I'll stop smoking. So she just did it for that reason. Shortly after that, the Chabad house made a trip to New York for Shabbos, and they were going to be by the Rebbe. And in those days, after being by Shabbos in 770, on Sunday, they all walked over to the Rebbe to get $1. And she said she walked over to the Rebbe to get her $1. The Rebbe didn't say anything unusual, but as soon as she walked away from the Rebbe, she just broke down, became very emotional, and that was the beginning of the change in her life. Couldn't explain it. It's not the Rebbe said something to her, revealed something to her. Just being in the presence of a tzaddik, there's a part of the neshama that sees what is going on spiritually, and the neshama responds to that. And the neshama up there sees this, it's projected into the part of the neshama that's conscious, and that leads to the person to become emotional, to be cried, to be uplifted, to be inspired, whatever the reaction is. So one can ask a question, if that's the case, then why isn't every single Jew living a perfect life according to Torah? If the neshama up there sees everything and it's projected into the neshama down here, then everyone should be in the perfect place. So the answer is that sometimes there are things that are blocking the flow from the soul that's up there to the soul that's down here. Just like there are pipes that carry water, carry oil, or other things from one location to another location, but if there's something gets stuck in the pipe, it'll block the flow. In the human body, the blood flows through the arteries. If chas v'sholem, there's something there that's blocking, it stops the flow. So there's also a flow that goes from the soul up there to the soul down here. And sometimes there are things that we go on spiritually that they block the flow. And if we're able to remove that blockage, we feel the neshama l'mayla in a more clear way and has a more revealed effect on us. How does this relate to Amunah? Because the same principle applies to Amunah. The neshama up there doesn't need faith to believe in Hashem. The neshama up there sees godliness firsthand. Just like we don't need faith to believe that the chair or the table or this tree is here. We see it with our physical eyes. The neshama sees godliness firsthand. And therefore, the neshama has that absolute certainty about Hashem. That certainty that the neshama up there has flows to the neshama down here. That down here, the part of the neshama that we are conscious of also feels that certainty about Hashem, but without seeing anything. But the certainty is projected into the conscious part of the neshama. And that's where the Amunah comes from. And that's what it means that every Jew has Amunah naturally, because we have a neshama. And part of our neshama sees godliness in an open, clear way. And what the neshama up there sees is projected to the neshama down here. It flows to the neshama down here. So therefore, it's natural for a person to have that amunah. If a person doesn't have the amunah, it's because there's something blocking. So the good news is, they don't have to create something new. I have to remove the blockage. And once I remove the blockage, then the natural amunah will flow. True, there are many people that have all sorts of questions because they weren't raised with belief in Hashem. And then they go to class, listen to a lecture, and they ask a lot of questions, they get a lot of answers, and they do start believing. True, it's because of the answer that they got, but it's much deeper than that. The answer that they got helped remove whatever was getting in the way. And once that's removed, the amunah, the belief that they have, is deeper than what the logic leads to, because it's something that's natural. But having the logical answer to the logical questions helps remove the obstacles, remove the blockage, and then the natural amunah is able to surface. There's a famous mimer from the Rabbi. This is a mimer that the Rabbi gave to every single one of us who was here in Crown Heights at the time. It's known as Atat Tzava. It was the last mimer for the Rebbe to distribute. Purim Cotton, Tavshinun Beis. So it was the 14th of Adar Aleph, 1992. And in that mimer, the Rebbe speaks about this concept, how the amunah we have in Hashem is a result of the fact that the neshama up there sees godliness, and that seeing godliness creates the certainty, and that certainty is projected into the neshama that's down here. And the Rebbe says there's even a deeper level than that. What's the deeper level? When we say the neshama up there sees godliness, by definition, this is saying that Hashem is sort of outside of the neshama. Like when I see something, if I see something, means that is outside of me, it's separate from me, and I see it. So the neshama sees Hashem. There's a deeper level that the certainty the neshama has is not just from seeing Hashem, but because the neshama and Hashem are absolutely one. The only thing I could think of as an example is like the certainty a person has about himself. It's not because I see myself in the mirror, because I am me. So therefore, I have that certainty about myself because I am who I am. The neshama and Hashem are absolutely one. And because of that oneness, the neshama has emunah in Hashem. And that's also projected to neshama that's down here in the guf. And the Rebbe explains these are two levels of emunah, one higher than the other. One comes as a result of the neshama up there seeing Hashem, and the other comes as a result of the neshama up there being one with Hashem. What is the difference? In ordinary circumstances, the first level is sufficient. Because the neshama sees Hashem, there's an absolute certainty. Therefore, I can go on in my life, davening and learning, doing mitzvahs. I'm not disturbed by any philosophical questions or any doubts or any questions that are challenging. I have absolute certainty in Hashem. But sometimes there are tremendous challenges in life, especially throughout the ages where people were required to Rahman al-Islam give up their lives for Hashem. That's a much, much greater, deeper kind of emunah necessary, that it's so strong even to the point of giving up a person's very life. That came from the fact that the neshama and Hashem are absolutely one. So the truth is we have both of these levels within us, except under these circumstances, which is the very challenging circumstances, only then does that deeper level of emunah rise sort of to the occasion and gives us the strength to have unconditional emunah even under the most difficult circumstances, not to give up. So this is what matzah accomplishes. In other words, matzah, when we say, is the food of faith, the faith in Hashem we have. The neshama sees it. The neshama is absolutely certain. From the neshama up there, it flows to the neshama down here. But there could be certain things that are blocking. Eating this matzah has it a spiritual power that through this, there's no longer anything blocking, anything in the way, and the emunah that the soul up there has flows to the soul that's in the body, and the person has this absolute faith in Hashem. So in other words, in a sense, we can say the matzahs are like the arteries through which the emunah flows. When a person eats matzah, it's baked the proper way, and it's eaten on the proper time. If you eat matzah in the middle of Purim, it won't accomplish anything. It might give you a stomachache, but not accomplish anything spiritually. But if you eat matzah on Pesach, the first night of Pesach, and you eat a kazayis, which is the right amount that you're supposed to eat, this has a tremendous spiritual power. This becomes the conduit, like we said before. This becomes the arteries through which the flow comes from the soul up there to the soul down here, and we have the emunah in Hashem. So therefore, if someone, God forbid, feels a certain weakness in emunah, you should know that when the Yont of Pesach comes around, that's when you get your emunah booster shot. The matzah we eat would be like an injection that we get once a year that injects a certain vitamin in the body, a certain thing to make us immune to something in the body. This is once a year, Hashem gives us an emunah booster shot, which gives us the strength for the rest of the year to have that emunah in Hashem. This also explains another thing about matzah. We know that the Rabbi has these mitzvah campaigns, go out and encourage and inspire other Yidden to do mitzvahs. Of course, one of them is matzah. In fact, could even be that matzah was one of the first things that the Rebbe came out after the Rebbe ascended to the seat of leadership to spread the mitzvah of matzah. People should eat matzah. The Rebbe insisted that we give matzah to people that it's going to be round matzah. Because you can have matzah that's square, you can have matzah that's machine matzah, you can have matzah that's not shmura matzah. And the Rebbe insisted we should distribute to people shmura matzah. It should be made by hand, and should also be round. What does the roundness have to do with the power of matzah? We know that there are a lot of things in Torah that are connected to a circle. For example, Simchas Torah, we're supposed to dance in a circle. In fact, 7 circles around with dancing with the Torah. A chassan and kala, we have the same thing, that under the chuppah, the kala circles the chassan with the family 7 times. The ring, really, a chassan and kala can get married with any piece of gold, but the custom is specifically a ring, is also because the ring is round. One of the things that is symbolized by something that's round, in Kabbalah, the word for infinite is igul, which means a circle. Finite is represented by a straight line. Infinite is represented by a circle. And the reason for that is because a circle has no beginning and no end. In fact, every detail of the circle is the same as the other. And in a circle, if you have something in the center, every part of the circle is equal distance from that. So the circle represents infinite. And how is that related to Amunah? Because the difference between serving Hashem with seichel, with intellect, and committing myself to learn Torah, to do mitzvahs, to live as a Jew is supposed to live, because intellectually I understand the meaning and the purpose and the value, but that's a limited commitment to Hashem, because intellect is limited, and every person's intellect is limited. But even the greatest intellectual person, there's a certain limit of how far intellect can go, and then I can come to a point which I don't understand. When a person's connection to Hashem and his commitment to Torah mitzvahs is with amunah, with faith and belief, then it's unconditional. There's nothing that can get in the way. There's no question that can get in the way. It's not a logical commitment. It's something deeper than logic, something that transcends logic, comes from the deepest depth of the soul. And therefore this is infinite. And that's why it's round, representing that infinite, unconditional power. And then there's another thing which the Rabbi also speaks about in that famous Maimer I mentioned before, and that is that the one who provides us with Amunah is Moshe Rabbeinu. The Zohar says that Moshe Rabbeinu is referred to as Raya Mehemna, the shepherd of Amunah. And he says it means that he shepherds us with Amunah. He feeds us Amunah. And there's a chapter in Tanya, if anybody wants to look this up in more detail, it's chapter 42, where the Alter Rebbe elaborates on this more, how in every generation there's someone like Moshe Rabbeinu, and his spiritual function is to strengthen the Amunah in the mind and hearts of every single Jew. And this was and is in all generations, the leaders of the generations are the Raya Mehemnas. They're the shepherds of Amunah. So therefore, one of the ways of strengthening our Amunah is by eating matzah. And one of the ways of strengthening our Amunah is by being connected to Moshe Rabbeinu. And in every generation, to the Moshe Rabbeinu of that generation. And that's why it was so significant for a chassid. Anything we get from the Rebbe is significant. When the Rebbe distributes something, it's not just giving us a tanya, or giving us a piece of cake, or giving us wine. We know that this is the Rebbe giving us something spiritual. There's a famous story with the Rebbe Rashab. There was once a Fabrengen, and he turned to a chassid who was sitting at a distance, and he said, "Here is l'chaim." He wants to give him l'chaim in a cup, some vodka. And the chassid said to the Rebbe, he picked up his cup and said, "Rebbe, I have already." And the Rebbe said to him, "What do you have? And what is it that I want to give you?" In other words, unfortunately, the Rebbe he didn't understand. The Rebbe doesn't give out vodka. The Rebbe is giving out, and the Rebbe is distributing and transmitting to a chassid spiritual strength, but it's being channeled through the vodka, channeled through the dollar, channeled through a tanya that the Rebbe distributed. So when the Rebbe distributed matzah, we also understood that the Rebbe is giving us spiritual strength. And think of it, both things together. Matzah is something which strengthens Amunah, and a Rebbe is the one who strengthens our Amunah, Raya Mehemna. So when the Rebbe gives us matzah, that is something which gives us tremendous spiritual strength in general, and specifically to have that Amunah. And we should be zeicha very soon to see the Rebbe here once again, and the Rebbe distributing matzah to all of us. And of course, there are levels in Amunah, so no matter how much Amunah a person has, we can rise higher and higher and higher. And even though Mashiach comes, what do you need Amunah for? Then we'll see everything with our physical eyes. It's another question. Once Mashiach comes, everything is visible. The answer is, as much as we'll understand, and as much as we'll see, which is so much more than we've ever experienced in the history of the world, but Hashem is infinite. So there's more to Hashem which we can't understand. And on that higher level, we have to have Amunah. And what happens after we understand that? So it's infinite. There's a higher level, and then there's Amunah to the higher level. And when does it end? It doesn't end, because Hashem doesn't end, and therefore the process doesn't end. So we should be zeicha to be able to celebrate Pesach in Yerushalayim with Mashiach in the Beis HaMikdash, with the matzah and everything spiritually that we need. And everybody should have a great Shabbos, and we should hear great news all over the world of this pandemic stopping miraculously, and all those that need to have a refuah shlema should be cured and healed, should be taken from Yad Mamish. A good Shabbos.